Hi guys. All right. So, yesterday we read chapter 1 of What Color is My World? One of my favorite books. So, we read chapter 1 yesterday and we learned about a lot of famous, or I should say important, can't say famous because he had to make Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had to make a book to let people know who these people are. So I don't want to say famous, but important African American inventors. We learned about 3 yesterday. And I was thinking, it's not fair for you guys to learn about all these important people and not have a way to remember who they are or what they did. So something that I wanted us to make together is a bridge map. Now, we have lots of think maps that we use. Oftentimes we'll use circle maps. Recently, we were starting to work on some tree maps. But if you notice in the back of the classroom, I wish I was there now. But in the back of the classroom, I had this big bridge map of all the African American inventors we were learning about. And it looks very much so like this. So when we make bridge maps show how things relate to each other. For example, Henry T. Sampson, he invented the gamma electric cell. Granville T. Woods, he invented the induction telegraph. And Louis Latimer, he invented carbon filament in light bulbs. Whenever you're learning about a lot of different people or a lot of different things, but you kind of learn the same thing about them. For example, we're learning about a lot of different African Americans, but we're learning about all their different inventions. This might be a really good way to organize your thinking. So what we're going to be doing throughout this reading is we're going to be looking at all the African American inventors and figuring out, based on how they relate, what did they invent? And really keep track of that stuff. So I'm going to actually take a moment. I want you to pause, find paper, find colored pencils, whatever you want to. The top row are the African American inventors that we learned about yesterday. On this middle row, these are the African American inventors that we're about to learn about in chapter 2. And because these chapters are pretty short today, I'm going to be reading chapter 2 and chapter 3. So later on, I'm going to write in the African American inventors for chapter 3. But right now, I just want you to take a moment to copy this down somewhere on your paper. And I would write down basically everything on this page. If you need to, you can pause it if you need to. All right? Okay, I'm going to assume that you paused. All right, so we learned about Henry T. Sampson, Granville T. Woods, and Louis Latimer. For chapter 2, we're learning about 3 interesting people. Dr. Mark Dean, Dr. Valerie L. Thomas, and James E. West. Wonder what their contribution to our day-to-day lives are. And I want you to keep in mind, we're really trying to keep our eye on Mr. Mattal here. And I love how someone already emailed me yesterday and said, Miss Jackson, I noticed that Herbie's the one who's telling the story. And that's completely true. We're seeing it from his perspective. So keep that in mind. We're not seeing it from Ella's perspective. We're learning about everything and seeing everything from Herbie. So we almost like we have his brain and we have his eyes. It's almost like we're Herbie right now, which is really, really cool. But I'm really hoping Herbie keeps an eye on this guy because I have a lot of questions about him. So this is chapter 2. About an hour later, Ella stopped sweeping and pulled out her cell phone. She started punching numbers. I kept sweeping. Who are you calling? Mama? Pizza. I'm starving. And they deliver. I don't have any money, I said. Do you? Well, we'll let the Mad Hatter pay. A guy that smart should have some cash, right? Mr. Mattal's voice startled us. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Ella and I just stared at him. That's a little weird, Ella said. Mr. Mattal grinned. If you're going to call me the Mad Hatter, you should at least know what he says in Alice in Wonderland. Does it make more sense in the book than when you say it? Mr. Mattal picked up a crumpled brown paper bag. from the huge pile of trash we had just swept together. He shook it open, walked over to Ella, and nodded for her to put the cell phone into the bag. Ella hesitated. I knew she was trying to figure out just what Mama's punishment would be for not doing as she was told. She must have come to the same conclusion I did. 2 weeks without her cell phone because she dropped it in the bag. He walked over to me, and I dropped mine in too. He twisted the neck of the bag, shut it, and briskly walked out the room. Follow me. Ella and I exchanged looks, then followed him. We heard his rapid footsteps, pattering down the stairs to the first floor. He moved fast for an old guy. When Ella and I reached the bottom of the stairs, Mr. Mattal was waiting for us, still clutching the paper bag with our phones. First things first, he said. He carried the bag to the carpenter's wood bench, which was covered with tools. He set the bag down, picked up a hammer, and started slamming the hammer into the bag. Loud crunching could be heard with each strike. Ella started screaming, "Are you crazy? I had to babysit for a year by that!" She ran over and grabbed the bag and then opened it and stared. Then she reached in and pulled out a handful of bent nails, chunks of plaster, a couple broken mousetraps, and assorted other trash. "Where are our phones?" Ella demanded. "Safe," said Mr. Mattal. "How'd you do that?" I asked. "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" Ella stared at Mr. Mattal. "Check your pockets," he said. Ella reached into her pocket and pulled out her cell phone, intact. I reached for my jeans and found mine there too. How'd you do that?" Ella stammered. "You see what you want to see," Mr. Mattal said, "but the world is so much more." "But that was some kind of voodoo magic or something," Ella said. "Magic is just encouraging people. Let me read that sentence again. Magic is just encouraging people to see things they haven't imagined yet. That's what inventors do. Isn't television magic? Is it an airplane? How about turning mold into medicine?" He pointed at our cell phones. "When you look at those, what do you see?" Ella and I looked at our phones. "A phone?" Ella said flatly. "I see an African-American kid named James West." James West is right here, by the way. "I see an African-American kid named James West who, at 8, was curious about how things worked, that was so curious about how things worked that he nearly electrocuted himself repairing a radio." Please do not try this at home. Definitely discouraged. "He later invented the microphone that is inside your cell phone." "I see another Black inventor, Dr. Mark Dean, who took computers out of laboratories and into business offices and homes. Without him, you wouldn't have a computer in your home or in your phone. And I see Dr. Valerie Thomas, whose invention excuse me, let me read that sentence again. And I see Dr. Valerie Thomas, whose invention that creates 3D images may be the future of television, video games, and medical diagnosis. That's what I see." Ella snorted. I took out my journal. James West, Mark Dean, and Valerie Thomas. Ella made another loud kissing up sound, but I hardly heard her over the sound of my pencil scratching across the paper. I'm going to take a pause, write down some notes, and then I'll show them to you so you can copy them down too. All right, so we have Dr. Mark Dean, who invented the home and office computers. Meaning that before, remember we were learning about the scientists, the black scientists in NASA who worked as computers, physical computers? Basically, when we first had computers, they were really, really big. Really, really big, really clunky. They didn't really fit into a home or a classroom or an office. So what Dr. Mark Dean did was he compacted the computer so that it was more simple to use, and people were able to bring them into their homes. So the fact that we even have laptops we can send you guys home with, the fact that when you go into school, when you go to the computer lab, you have a computer, that's thanks to him. Now, Dr. Valerie L. Thomas invented 3D imaging. So if you've ever seen a 3D movie, thank her. And a lot of the other 3D things that we have, a lot of the virtual reality effects that we have now is also because of her. And a lot of the 3D imaging done in hospitals is also because of her. Now, James E. West created a compact microphone. So the fact that I am able to record this right now, because I'm recording it on my phone, is thanks to James E. West, because he made a microphone small enough to fit inside a cell phone. So I'm going to leave this up, because I also put down the 3 other inventors we're going to learn about in the next chapter. Okay, I'm going to assume you took the time to pause and write that down. And if you think I'm rushing through it, it's because this chapter is literally 3 pages. So I decided, let's just do it today. So we're going to be learning about 3 new inventors: Joseph Lee, Lloyd A. Hall, and George Crumb. And I'm going to be honest, you might want to eat something after this, because after reading this chapter before, it always makes me a little hungry. Okay, chapter 3. You don't think that was weird? Ella said as she dragged her soapy sponge across the window. What? She stared at me as if I had just tried to put my pants on over my head. Are you kidding me? Dorkenstein? The whole reappearing cell phone thing he just did. That's a big 10 on the weirdo meter. It's just a trick. Big deal. If you think that's no big deal, you're a big 10 on the weirdo meter too. She wrung her sponge and brown water dripped into the bucket. Ugh. I had already washed my set of windows and was now polishing out the streaks with newspapers, just how Dad had taught us at our old house. As I polished, I looked out onto the quiet neighborhood that would soon be ours. Across the street, an Asian kid about my age was walking a small dog that sniffed everything they passed. The boy was singing along with some song on his iPod. They passed an elderly black couple returning from the grocery store, each carrying one bag. The woman stopped to pet the dog and said something, and the boy and the man laughed. I'm starving, Emma complained. This has to be cruel and unusual punishment. Listening to you whine all day is a cruel and unusual punishment. Hungry? A voice boomed from the doorway. Ella and I both jumped. Ella leaned towards me and whispered, We need to put a bell around his neck. How do you get to be so sneaky? I prefer to think of it as moving through the world humbly, Mr. Mattal said. Only calling attention to yourself when you have something to contribute. Ella quickly recovered her poise and threw her dirty sponge into the bucket. You asked if we were hungry and we could use some food. Mr. Mattal smiled. I do get distracted sometimes. Let's take a look at what we've got. The kitchen looked like someone had driven a truck through it, then backed it up to hit anything they missed the first time. The paint on the cabinets was chipped and peeling off. The stove had been pulled away from the wall, and all the tubes and wires and stuff at the back had been pulled off. There was one rickety chair, and it was piled with tools. There's no refrigerator, Ella said, her voice a little desperate. If she went too long between meals, things could get ugly. Did you order pizza or Chinese or something? Mr. Mattal opened the kitchen door, which led to a back porch. He bent over and dragged a large ice chest into the kitchen. Got everything we need right here. He flipped open the lid of the ice chest and started tossing food backwards over his shoulder without looking. Ella and I leaped up and began snatching things out of the air. Slices of bread, small bags of potato chips, individually wrapped, slices of bologna, peaches, tiny packets of salt and pepper. At first, for Ella and me to be hopping around the kitchen grabbing food out of the air was one more strange thing in a series of strange things that had happened since we met. Mrs. Mattal, excuse me, let me read that sentence again. It's a doozy. At first, for me and Ella to be hopping around the kitchen grabbing food out of the air was one more strange thing in a series of strange things that had happened since we met Mr. Mattal. But suddenly, it was kind of fun too. Ella was laughing and pirouetting like a ballet dancer as she caught a flying piece of bread. I pretended to be a pro baseball player, snagging a peach like a popfly. I waved it around and made crowd cheering noises. Then Mr. Mattal closed the lid, sat on it, and bit into a peach. He smiled at Ella. You think my sleight of hands with the cell phone was weird, but there was a black man named Fred Jones who pulled off a magic trick that was even weirder. He made supermarkets appear where there hadn't been any. Forever changed the way Americans eat. Mr. Mattal pointed at my sandwich. A black man named Joseph Lee affected how bread was made. Another black man named Lloyd Hall made sure that the bologna you're eating is safe. And a black man named George Crumb invented potato chips. He gestured around the room. The whole room is filled with a kind of magic that changed the world. Black magic, Ella said. And that is the end of chapter 3. Give me a moment. I'm going to take some notes on the adventures that we just learned about. Okay. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I told you I keep getting hungry when I read that chapter. So, we learned about 3 new adventures. We learned about Joseph Lee, who invented the bread making machine. The fact that you have bread available to you in the store is a big part of him because he was able to mass produce bread. And it was the first one to really find a way to efficiently make a lot of bread that can be sold. Lloyd A. Hall, he improved on the system of food preservation, which is basically saving food so that it doesn't go bad. So if you're able to, the fact that we have so much food we can keep in cabinets, the fact that we have so much food we can keep in the fridge that doesn't go bad, that you can keep maybe for weeks and for some foods even months, a lot of it is because of his patent on food preservation that we still use today. And then we have the famous George Crumb, who gave us the potato chip, which was a complete accident. I'm going to actually highly encourage you to research this man. Because every single time, he is the reason. Every time I read this, I say, I haven't really had chips in a while. May as well decide to have some. I don't know. These are some of my favorites, at least. But I'm going to keep this up again for you guys to write it down so that we can keep track together. There was one more person that we learned about, Fred Jones. But because there's so much on this paper already, I didn't want to write him down yet. We can write him down together tomorrow on the next chapter. I'll just write him down as kind of a pre-note before we get into the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to assume you took that time to pause, write down anything you needed to. Make sure this is somewhere in your home. If you want to, you can always take a picture with it and then send it to me so I know that you're following along. And then let me know, do you want to do more interactive things like this? And again, I told you to look out for this Mr. Mattal guy. Every time he comes around now is doing something magical. I'm telling you. I feel like there's some kind of secret that he's kind of hiding there. But I'm also liking how, Ella and Herbie's such a sweetheart in this book. But Ella, man, her attitude, I hope she checks her attitude. I don't know, with Mr. Mattal and all of his little tricks, I don't know how well it's going to go for her. So hopefully things end up really well for her. Okay. Talk to you guys later. I love you guys. I miss you guys. Remember, you are excellent. And as School to Avengers, we don't quit. Bye.